Welcome to The Masters. The Masters is a conversation series with builders who've built what others study. Digital transformation is one of the core pillars that every builder in the country has tried to figure out but has struggled. In this series, we are going to cover a wide variety of topics spanning design to finance, sales to marketing, and everything in between. Today, we have the managing director of Brigade, which is one of India's top 10 builders, spanning residential, retail, hospitality, and commercial spaces. Pavitra, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Masters.
Thanks so much, Akhil. I'm talking not just about real estate, but also I think my favorite topic, which is technology in real estate. So I'm really happy to be doing this. Thanks.
So let's start with why, right? Like, why does a developer need to get into digital transformation?
So one is definitely why does any business need to look at digital transformation? That's one aspect, and then specifically in real estate itself. So for any organization, I fully believe that being more digitized in terms of processes helps us focus on um, giving the right product to the customer and resolving problems at the right time and knowing what is happening across the organization and enabling scale as well. So, specifically for us, technology was a huge part of us being able to scale up in terms of our own business. Over the last 8 to 9 years, Brigade itself has seen a huge scale up in terms of operations, especially on the residential side. And we had to get our operations to scale alongside with the market and the business itself. So for developers and in real estate specifically, I think it's not well known for using a lot of technology. It's historically known as being a very low tech kind of industry. So a lot of it is low hanging fruit. Therefore, it's even more fulfilling to see some of the implementations happen and show the good results. And I think it's quite rewarding also to have these processes kick in, have them scale up, and show our team themselves like how much they can do better and how much more work they can do and how much more productive they can be and meet the customer's objectives by just using the technology that we are helping them do their work with.
You say this that it helps teams create efficiency, but I've seen everyone struggle with very basic things, right? I've seen developers in India not have their customer data properly on their CRM. I've seen them get collections, not know where the collections has come in from, right?
Yeah.
So, how do you go about starting this transformation, right? Because sometimes it feels so overwhelming that I don't know where to start, right? Like, and
Yeah.
so how do you go about prioritizing? What did you see when you came in? What were the first things that you wanted to fix?
Yeah, I think when you're looking for problems to solve, everything can seem like a problem. Um, when I got very involved with Brigade, which is about 10 years ago, I entered into the residential business through the sales and marketing angle of the business. So naturally, there was a lot that we could do on that front. And of course, I think residential sales, every company will be generating tons of leads, needs to know their sales team's productivity. So naturally, a lot of us are anyway using certain systems. But is that system really scaling with you? And like you said, what's the quality of the data in the system? Those were kind of some of the basic issues that we had to actually tackle. But when we started off, it was more about figuring out where can we enable our teams for scale. But eventually, I realized that if we're only focusing on internal process, we can go in multiple different directions on just trying to improve process. But where is the customer in the whole thing? So actually, we turned it on its head and said, let's make the customer the center of this.
Okay.
Otherwise, a lot of the initiatives that we were choosing was on helping one team do their job, and they were leaving out other teams from the overall process itself. So I found that it was making us even more siloed in terms of just saying, I want to only focus on sales, I want to only focus on marketing. So instead, we said, let's put the customer at the center of this, and every single initiative that we do has to be looked at from the customer standpoint. So, one, that's naturally driving value to your end customer and focusing the business on that. And the second was that it was cross functional. So, it couldn't just be one team saying, hey, I'm going to resolve this, my piece of it, and I don't care how the other stuff fits in. So, it was more of a what I like to call a value chain as opposed to a process transformation. So, different teams different stages of the entire journey for the customer were digitized, and we were looking at it from that perspective. So coming back to it, it was putting the customer at the center and then looking at where could you make the max impact. The other important thing is to make sure that when you're looking at tech transformation, the teams that are impacted are the ones who want the transformation. Because if it's anyway going to be hard to make a transformation happen, but if you're working with a team that doesn't want to do it at all or doesn't see the benefit, it's much harder. So I think if one, you have a team that wants to game change how they're doing things, and two, they're going to dedicate some of their bandwidth outside of core operations to do it, that is a big factor in the overall success.
Most builders are very project centric, right? So their thought process starts that, you know what, I'm going to build this project, and these are the things I have to do. So when you take a customer centric approach, right, as opposed to a project centric approach, right, which all teams are used to, what are some of the things that you see just change inside the culture of the company?
I think, first of all, it is the reorienting all teams. Sometimes sales thinks their job is only to sell. Customer team thinks their job is only to talk to the customer about CRM related or documentation related things. So a lot of it was just changing the mindset itself, that we're all here to sell this product to the customer. And a product just isn't a sales team job. It's about the design of the product itself. So I think when we started looking at customer, one of the big initiatives we did, and this seems like normal for most developers today, but we started building out the system in 2016 actually,
Okay.
where we had a ticket issued for every single customer query. So that was how we started to focus on the customer, because people were writing in and asking for help on something or the other. And it was a black box as far as I was concerned. I didn't know what sort of questions people were asking, because it was up to the CRM team to tell me whether they had a question about their statement of accounts or whether they had another issue. So it was very much, did someone think that issue was important enough to raise with me?
Right.
Now, I didn't want to leave that very subjective and up to somebody else's judgment. So we drove this whole system where every single incoming request from a customer was ticketed, whether it came through an email or they were calling our landlines or phone mobile numbers, whatever it was. And over the course of now 10 years, I have huge amount of visibility into all issues, big, small, individual, escalated at a community level. So it helps me know if I even have a product issue, which I will immediately then connect to my design team.
Right.
Our product takes 4 to 5 years for us to design, sell, construct, deliver.
Right.
So the cycle that it takes is too long for us to just sequentially learn how to do this better. So
Yeah.
now we can incorporate the feedback as it is happening and improve the product that's eventually coming to the customer.
Yeah, you
So-
cut all the layers of filters, right? Like the team effectively filters what information comes up to you, right?
Yes.
So the second you create a structure, automatically, you know, you've cut through all of that and you're managing to get real information from the ground where just listening to what the customer is saying.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Right?
The other thing is, sometimes teams don't feel like it's such a big deal. That the fact that someone is asking for a statement of account or they're asking for receipts is just the normal course of business, right? But what we wanted to focus on was the number of questions and queries we are getting, and can I just free up a whole team's time on not having to do that at all in the first place. So having the ticketing system just helped me understand where were most of the queries coming from, which are the processes that then needed to be looked at, and that's where the digitization of those processes were higher in priority for me. So then I would know, like, look, if I can get rid of, say, 30% of my incoming customer requests, my team can focus on something else. So it was a way for us to detect what was actually happening with the customer. But second, it was a way for us to prioritize where we wanted to spend our time and digitize things, or maybe change the process so that it wasn't taking internal capacity anymore.
Very interesting, because what I'm hearing is volume versus value.
Yeah.
Right? So these are voluminous tasks which may not necessarily be expensive to cater to, but just by the amount of effort that's required to cater to it, you're solving for it, right? How do you go about prioritizing this, right? Because like I know that you can't do change it, you can't do the transformation in one go, right? You have to break it up into
Yeah.
phases.
Yeah.
So how did you go about prioritizing this?
So we knew a lot of issues that were existing with our foundational systems as well, but they were really large problems, like the way in which our SAP was configured or the way in which our CRM system was configured was not really allowing us to scale on connecting the two systems and growing from there.
Mm.
And because of that, we couldn't do a lot of other, easier things. I was like digitizing a booking application, for example. Um, Basically, we couldn't connect our financial system to our customer system. And we were trying to digitize the customer journey, but the financial system was completely separate from that. So for a few years, we were addressing a lot of the low-hanging fruit because, again, I think when you're starting with digital transformation, you need to show some quick wins that are exciting for everybody because these things are tough to do.
Yeah.
And it involves a lot of change, and people aren't so happy when you're changing the way in which they do their work. So some quick wins are always helpful, but eventually, for real impact, you have to address the foundational issues. So actually, this kind of happened the same time as the second wave of COVID. So I remember all of us were remotely working. I was in the US, the team was here. We were on calls, pretty much around the clock, like trying to figure out how to fix this foundational data issue of connecting things. And most of the time it's very unglamorous and a difficult and challenging project where you don't see the value that's going to happen down the road.
Right.
So I think it is up to leadership to push your team to do those kind of tough, boring jobs, and then you create a base layer on which you can work off of. So we fortunately got through all of this, and after that we were able to really game change our overall customer journey process. We were able to digitize our booking form, we were able to digitize our customer agreements, do the digital signing. So one of the stats that we have is prior to all of this, it used to take us 75 days just for the customer to get their agreement, sign it, and send it back.
Right.
Today, from the day of booking to when I get my agreement with the next 20% down, it's 40 days. The entire process.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
With the 20%.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing, right? Like
Yeah.
that's orders of magnitude more
Yes.
powerful, right?
Yeah. So again, like, how did we prioritize? We looked at, hey, let's look at the whole order to cash process.
Right.
And this is an important one for us because one, we're doing a great job selling, but when am I locking in the customer and when am I getting them, on the track of just paying alongside your construction milestones? Because everything until then is sort of, there are so many different paths, but once they're in the construction milestone journey, it's very automatic. You have those are typical processes that we all have in place. You raise an invoice, it gets paid, you collect it, all of that is there. But the previous part, which was just getting that into your system, verifying all the information, issuing an agreement, getting it back, and locking in your customer with RERA rules and all of that, that was a huge time frame that it was taking.
So did that cut down cancellations as well?
Yeah, it did. Because we would basically, it cut down cancellations because we are very, very clear that the customer wanted to get into the booking at that point because there were so many different stage gates of, verifying the information, calling, cross-checking, is this the right rate that you
Right.
paid, like, is this the right cost sheet, all of we are verifying all of the information, giving them a chance to go through a lot of the information and not rushing them through the initial part, because I think sometimes that also happens, like there's a lot of urgency to just get some booking.
Right.
And then down the road, it's somebody else's problem to ensure that the booking actually comes through and materializes. So we try to assign the work for where it should naturally reside in terms of the process. So sales team was fully accountable for making sure that it entered our system with the correct information, and then it would have less likelihood of canceling.
Lovely. In terms of the change management that you mentioned, right? I feel like teams typically push back on adopting new systems. It's very easy to trash a system that no, it's not working, no, it's not doing this, right? Like, and they're putting the wrong inputs and obviously not getting the output that's expected, right? Like, at what point do you say that, okay, no, now it's cold turkey, right? Like now you have to use the system, 100% of everything has to be here.
Yeah.
Like how do you time that?
So I think you have to have multiple personalities to drive change management. First, as the desire to make that change, like as someone who's driving that change, you have to convince people and have them sign up with your vision. You can't just say, I said we have to do it this way and this is how it's going to be done. Maybe that's for another personality down the road, but at least initially, you've got to tell people what you're looking for, why you want to get there, convince on how that's better for everyone rather than just issue orders about it, right? So I think a lot of time initially is spent on, I do spend in terms of at least setting the stage for why we want to do this. And it's, yes, it's going to improve the customer. Yes, it's going to improve, transparency in how the process is working. But their work will also become, I feel, more rewarding because we can focus on actually making impact as opposed to just doing the same thing over and over again. And then people can also figure out how they want to, change the way in which they work. So that first part is really important, which is getting everyone on board.
Right.
Then it is making them part of the new requirement. So many times why software, implementations are so hard is because when you're coming up with the requirement, you don't have all use cases thought through. You've not maybe talked to all different stakeholders, not just those functional folks, but others who might be laterally sort of connected to the whole thing. We've not maybe connected the infrastructure discussion on the entire piece. There are so many aspects to the whole thing now that you can typically outsource this to the implementation partner or a consultant. But I feel when you don't have senior stakeholders involved or driving that process, some of these things can get missed. And then you're coming up with a solution that doesn't actually reflect what people want.
Right.
And that becomes very apparent when you're starting to test it and do the user acceptance testing. And then people are like, this is not what I wanted. I don't want to use the system at all. Ask them to change. So that's always going to happen, I think, but you may as well try to minimize those
Yeah.
chances of that happening. So, and then finally, two more aspects is how you're going to review this system being used.
Right.
So yes, people are using the new system, but if the senior people who are responsible for that process don't review the outcome through the new system or
Right.
through dashboards reflecting that, it will never get adopted. So I have done enough transformations, or I thought I did the transformation, but I never reviewed that system outcome. So then it actually just dies a slow, painful death because people realize no one's actually looking at it.
Right.
And then they stop using it. And then you're wondering why I did this whole process change. We spent money, people, spend time on it, and still we're doing things the old way.
Right.
So management has to review using the new system and also have that discipline to just drive it with the team and say, hey, if it's not in the system, it doesn't exist. These are all basics. But again, I feel that that is what actually makes the difference. And finally, it is about tying incentive to that. It could be financial, it could be something else. Many times it is financial. You've got to change the way people's KPIs are working and what you're actually going to measure. And giving them some time to get used to the fact that their KPIs are now going to be a little different.
Oh, yeah.
Or and a couple of times we also said, hey, you know what, don't worry about how quickly you're going to start using this new system or maybe what your old KPIs were looking at. Even if your incentive was previously tied to that, your SIP or whatever was your financial incentive, I'll give you like a 3 months break or a 4 months break. I just want you to use the new system.
Right. We
So-
we also did something similar, right? Like because when we this last year was a lot about AI adoption, and everyone's quarterly incentives had a portion which was weighted with just AI, right? That I wanted them to realize that how easy life gets if you just train a bot for yourself and what your work is. And once, like earlier, there was a lot of hesitation, right? Like even engineers were very hesitant to adopt AI, which is very ironic, right? Like that it's built for them. And then when they started using it today, I think like 80% of code is written by AI, and it's just engineers reviewing it,
Yeah.
right? So like now they're in love with it, and now they don't know how to operate without it. So yeah, like financial incentives goes the furthest
Yes.
in
Yeah.
adoption,
Yeah.
right? So the question on everyone's mind, and keep in mind this is a builder-focused audience. Everyone is directly in real estate or is interested in real estate of some form. What does your Monday morning dashboard look like?
So Monday morning, actually, the most important thing for me right now is how quickly am I getting lands and how fast am I launching the projects. So our Monday reviews are mostly focused on that, like what is our raw material process coming in and how fast am I monetizing that. And this is actually part of a transformation that we're doing right now, which I would say is one of the hardest ones that I've done. And it's not yet a completed process, and I think it would still keep evolving, but I think it would be one of the biggest game changers for us at Brigade. Um, One, because it is taking, I think, the most complex part of the business, which is acquiring the land, getting it to a point where you can transact it, the due diligence, in parallel, maybe starting off the design and approvals process. Um, Figuring out the go-to-market strategy and tying everything together until when you have RERA. So this is, pretty much the bread and butter of what we do. And over the course of the last decade or so, we've seen that once we have launched a project, you've pretty much de-risked entirely. Like in terms of sales, in terms of construction, we have a fairly good idea in terms of what's going to work and what it's going to take. So this is the most cross-functional, and also it's the teams that typically work very much in silos that you're trying to connect. Maybe the entire design and approvals team works together, but how well are they working with the sales team and the customer team, or how is the project side of it getting integrated so that once you have the RERA approvals, you're ready to start off construction ASAP. It seems very common sense and natural, but in companies that, first of all, that are in this industry with so many external influences and so many external sort of factors that are constantly going wrong or difficult to manage. It's one thing where we wanted to take out all of the internal reasons why we're not doing something on time and leave it to, okay, if there's an external factor, there's an external factor. But it cannot be something that is one team's issue, or something where we didn't communicate or didn't share information or didn't plan in advance. That to me is not excusable, because we control that part of it and we have to take that piece out entirely. So this is one massive engagement that we're doing right now. The benefit is also that it helps me scale across different geographies, because it puts together a certain way in which we're all going to work, and will help me do that across different geographies, which means my bandwidth is much more scalable in that manner. So this is something we do on Mondays, and that dashboard is more about how fast am I launching, how much did I say I would launch at the beginning of the year, how much have I done already, what are the major issues stopping me from doing so. And that's a big part of Monday. But the way in which we've looked at dashboards in general is the traditional ways to sort of look at what already happened and review what already happened. These were your sales, this is your collections. I mean, that's great, and I feel everyone should have that information handy. But how am I going to add value and how am I going to impact things is to know, how is it going to look? What's that going to look like by the end of the month, end of the quarter, end of the year? So can we get more predictive about it? And there's two parts of that. One is even just which KPI are you looking at? So traditionally, not even traditionally, I think typically many of us look at lagging indicators, which are just reflecting what already happened. But there are definitely indicators and data that you have today that can tell you this is how much you will be doing down the road. So for example, your number of leads or the quality of those leads, and the how long it has already taken, your customer conversations can tell you when you're going to actually close the sale.
Right.
So applying those things, you can kind of predict how much your sales would be given the activity that has happened so far. This is where I'll be at the end of even the week or even next month. So we need to look in that direction. Otherwise, you're spending a lot of time discussing things that already happened rather than trying to impact what's going to happen. Right.
Yeah.
So that's a big focus. I can't say we've fully unlocked that across all teams, but that's a big area of change for us.
Very interesting, right? Because lead indicators can come in a lot of forms, right? Like today, one of the best lead indicators on the Iran war is the amount of pizza being ordered around the Pentagon. Right?
Yes.
So
That's
is
a leading indicator. Yeah.
right, like
Exactly.
so. what lag, yes, sales is a lag metric, right? Like it comes after,
Yeah.
everything else comes after. So you know what your inputs are to do this, right? Like, but this is in a place where we are looking at perfect data, right? Like, and um, like sales would be perfect data in a way because lead is measurable, everything is measurable, right? As a builder, you have instincts, right? Like what you said, common sense, right? Like, and all of us, especially in land acquisition, right? There is the data and there is your instinct, right? How do you balance that?
So a lot of it is just physically doing things. I mean,
Right.
that's, I think, one thing in our industry. You can't run away from it and you shouldn't be running away from it.
Right.
So as much as I love technology, data, all of this aspect of work and trying to translate the work into this format, a huge part of it is just physically understanding the space, going there, understanding what that final product could mean to somebody, and designing around that. So yeah, you're going to have a lot of metrics in terms of, or data available in terms of, this is a supply that's coming in, or this is the the peers who are doing these projects, or these are the number of jobs getting created. Great. But if you don't have the right product that's going to create that desire in a customer to want to buy with you, then it's of no use.
Right.
So for sure, a lot of it is instinct in terms of catching a cycle or feeling like, some things maybe going in a different direction in terms of demand. It's always being open to hearing more data points.
Right.
But in the end, so yeah, you need to have access to the data, but how you make your decision can't be entirely, only on data. It has to be data driven, but the intuition piece only comes, I think, from that experience and doing it. So, a few years ago, I would always think, okay, how do I get this kind of expertise and experience? And I think now, from what I have learned, like, nothing beats the experience, then nothing beats the outcome than just doing it yourself, and building that intuition yourself is not going to come
Right.
any other way. So that said, what we're all looking for is to enable the rest of the team to make decisions similar to how you would, or at least have them understand how we make decisions. The intuition is there, but a lot of it can be enabled by data. And that's one big piece that I feel is so important, what I call the democratization of data.
Right.
I don't want to hold the ability to make all the decisions myself. I want everyone to have access to the same information, because there's nothing magical that I'm doing with it. I have all the information, so I'm able to make a certain kind of decision. So that's why when people work in silos, they're not able to make a decision for the organization, because they have data that's and information that's only relevant to their piece. Maybe they'll make a
Right.
great functional decision, but they're not going to make a great decision for the org, or
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
for the project,
Yeah.
so to speak. So I thought one of the ways in which we can delegate better is to give everyone access to all of the data that they need to make good quality decisions.
Does AI help in that?
Yeah, it's going to be a huge, huge help, I feel. First of all, until this point, we've all just been scrambling, trying to connect all of our systems together.
Yeah.
And now that's not going to be a problem anymore. I mean, I think even before AI came into it, there's all this data lake and data warehouse and so on, that I think various companies have been on all these journeys of connecting those things together and putting an analytics layer on top of it. And despite all of the consulting firms that work in this area, etc., somehow none of us have, fantastic dashboards or, high quality data available. So this is one thing where it almost doesn't matter what sort of system you're running. As long as the system is enabling you to run your processes well, it doesn't matter if it doesn't speak to another system. Now you can connect all of those systems together through a data warehouse, or if it's unstructured data, through a data lake. And with AI, you can query that data.
Right.
I don't think everything can be replaced by AI agents or anything, because there are some things you need to see the same data over and over again and see it in the same way. And typically when you're querying stuff using agents, it's going to come out differently each time.
Of course.
Right? So I think there are use cases for both, but there is a skill to creating dashboards and skill to asking how you want to view information. And I think with more and more of our team being able to use AI to do that, I think we will become a more thoughtful or using more thought in terms of doing our work instead of being very reactive. And that to me is really exciting. For me, actually, it removes a whole bunch of layers of people who I needed to give me things. Like now I just have all of the information. I can ask it whatever I want. I don't need to hire like specific data analytics people to do a lot of the work that I'm just thinking of. It could just be ideas that are very quickly coming back to you. So like the closure of the feedback or the inputs that you wanted are coming back to you very fast, and you can react very quickly to things as well.
Just like an AI chief of staff.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the holy grail of
Yeah.
what everyone is
Yeah.
looking for,
Yeah.
right? What are some of the other use cases that you're using this for, right? Like data analysis is one broad, very core aspect of it, right? But what are some of the other use cases of AI that you've seen the teams use?
Yeah. So I feel the usual ones are sort of, using Gen AI for creative, creative output, campaigns, finessing a lot of that, sales pitches, customer helplines also. So if you've got enough body of information about your product, it's actually quite easy for your customer team to refer back to that and give the right kind of answer as opposed to
Right.
it's just faster and more
Right.
correct. So those are the more typical use cases. But what I have been trying to use it more from like which are the teams that aren't typically tech forward, and what are the kinds of roles that we can help them do with AI. So I think legal team is one such. While in the external world, I think the legal industry has been using a lot of AI to generate documents and so on. So this is one area where we have looked at. Even in terms of title due diligence, there's a lot of great solutions coming out using AI for better quality title due diligence. On the design angle, I think there's a huge scope for AI here. Of course, again, in terms of generating new designs under various parameters, in terms of improving efficiency, in terms of, predicting and seeing in the future, like what are your issues going to be when you construct out this particular design, which is of huge, huge value.
Right.
You don't want to learn that after you've poured the concrete. So I think in design, the number of use cases are probably phenomenal. We are working on a couple of them, but I think there would be more and more in that space. And I'm actually excited to spend a lot more time on that aspect of AI in the engineering and design side rather than, sales, marketing, customer, where I think it's more common and people are also more attuned to it. But these are the areas where you really have to push the adoption of technology and of course AI. And again, AI I feel is too widely used. A lot of it is anyway just process transformation, but now you do have the chance to add this layer on top of it.
Yeah, you said something interesting, right? Like you can effectively combine design with your ticket management software
Yeah.
and then know what are the
Yeah.
kind of complaints that you're getting
Yeah.
out of this particular layout of 5 years after that they
Yes.
live in, right? Like, and that would probably help you create better
Yeah.
buildings.
Yeah.
right?
It's actually the only limitation on AI I have felt is us, because we just haven't thought of some use cases.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And actually there's just so many different ways in which you can do it. Like even from the basic things, like how do I use it? There are just think about anything that you would do yourself, and that's what you can get that to do.
Okay, so I have a side question that I want to ask you, right? There's a lot of conversation around demand destruction thanks to AI with IT jobs being lost. Because you're in some of the south cities which are all IT focused, right? Like today, Bangalore and Hyderabad. So, what is your insight been towards this? Is this demand destruction real?
So I feel the demand has definitely changed, but it is very much still there. In fact, it has only become more premium over the last few years. We've seen the entire market size expand actually. So that was something we were trying to understand in the context of, say, IT services firms, net hiring maybe coming down. But on the same side, we were seeing GCCs hire dramatically. And we have seen that not just in terms of the uptake of office space, but also flex space. And in our own residential portfolio, we've just seen the amount of space getting absorbed double, triple in the last few years, and pricing as well. So pricing itself has doubled in, say, a Bangalore, in Hyderabad also. In Chennai, it has gone up pretty dramatically in terms of the type of product that people are willing to buy. So they're looking at more expensive apartments and also larger apartments. So, the entire ticket size itself of what people are willing to spend on has gone up dramatically. So now that cannot happen in when jobs are being destroyed, so to speak. So I think the jobs are just changing. So rather than going or staying with the IT services firms, they're being brought in-house via GCCs. And in many of these cases, the talent is also going up the value chain. So rather than freshers, it's middle management, senior management, people who can use the technology and drive the technology change within their own organizations. Because these things are not, as I've been explaining also, like these are not just one-off projects. You're as a business, you're constantly looking at ways in which you're going to keep making things better internally, and technology is a huge part of that. It's an enabler. So you're using it to refine your product, you're using it to be more efficient, you're using it to drive better customer service. So there are constantly things you need to be implementing and doing from a tech perspective. So maybe it was being done by the consulting firms before, but a lot of it is just coming in-house now through GCCs.
Very interesting, right? And you made a point about commercial spaces. It's seen record absorption last year, right? And given the context that even Amazon and Google are expanding their office space here, who are effectively creators of AI today, they would not be doing that if it wasn't for them seeing India as an opportunity. Right? You still need the engineers to program it. We recently had the AI summit where all the top honchos of AI of the world came together, right? And that's probably because we have the biggest talent pool in the world
Right.
to implement AI, right? And
That's right.
that's still
Yeah.
going to be
Yeah.
incredibly important going forward. And like, sure, there may be some short-term disruptions because um, n- net hiring may be weaker simply because entry-level jobs are fewer and fewer. But mid and high would always, like, you always want an engineer who can read code,
Yeah.
right? And that
Yeah.
demand
Yeah.
is infinite today.
Yeah, and I think there is an India case to be made for almost any business, regardless of where they're operating, because of the quality of talent and the kind of work that is coming out of India. It is not just, and everyone has that example about us starting off as a BPO kind of services economy, but we are doing cutting edge work out of India. Multiple companies are doing that. We have Mercedes-Benz in one of our properties in Bangalore. And outside of Germany, this is the largest R&D facility. So the scale at which India has also moved and the quality of the work has gone from VPO to R&D for a firm like Mercedes-Benz, which is one of the best automobile makers in the world and at the forefront of using technology to keep improving their product. So I think that is, see, believe in the human race to find better ways to live and better ways to work. And I think AI is just one part of that. We will be using AI to improve our quality of life. That's happened since the invention of the wheel or the steam engine or whatever it is. The human race has always become more and more productive. And I think AI is just part of that story. And the resilience of the human race is to keep evolving, keep innovating, and keep doing things better. So I think it's just one part of it that is now causing a lot of maybe fear and doubt, because that change is going to be pretty dramatic. And maybe with the equalization of information that we have, like everyone's viewpoints are hitting us all the time. So it creates a lot of discussion and then uncertainty, and therefore there's a lot of fear around the whole topic.
Right. The fear cuts across industries, right?
Yes. Yeah. But I actually think it's hugely positive if we actually think about the quality of work that we can get done individually and with our teams and with businesses. I think we can use it to improve what we're doing from a business standpoint, and also use a lot of the time and energy saved to solve so many other problems that we have as a human race.
I mean, AI is a great level out, right? Like earlier, you spoke of how the quality of decisions that you can take that will be available to everyone in your organization thanks to the data available in the organization, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to have a Pavitra AI running across a base.
I'm working on that.
Lovely. So, our final question, right? What would your advice be to developers who want to get to this level of deployment inside their organizations, right? But they're still stuck in their own old ways and they've tried to implement different projects and failed in the last 4 or 5 years. What would be your advice to them that how do they start their transformation journey this time around?
Hmm. I think the main thing to do is take some time off, think about what they want the business to look like a few years from now. And maybe that's tough to do with something like AI, but maybe the flip side is also anything can happen. So, what is it that they want to do? What is it that they want their life to look like? And therefore, how does the business support that? And what are the opportunities that could potentially come along? And then see where they stand today and how does technology help them to get from where they are now to where they want to be in the future. So, a lot of it is very big picture, big picture thinking, strategic roadmap. All of those things will come into place. But first, you have to fix where you want to go and confront where you are now, and look at the gap, and also not make incremental changes. I think with the kind of technology that we all have access to today, you don't need to go through the same path that we've all gone along over the last 10 years or whatever. You can actually leapfrog so many issues. I mean, India itself has leapfrogged so many issues, like, say, digital payments. Yeah, we didn't have a banking system that reaches all corners of our country, but with digital payments, we entirely leapfrog the physical infrastructure hassle, all that, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a case for that in business as well. You don't have to have the same path as, say, even Brigade. Like, you could just say, that's my problem. I think with all the access to different technology that I have today, this is the way in which I could skip all of those things and just get to the end of the finish line then itself. But it is one thing that I believe that it should have. If the senior leadership doesn't have the inclination to do it themselves, they need to have trusted people who will do it for them and who are very, very aligned with their same level of thinking. It cannot be just outsourced to a consultant. It can't just be your typical IT function. There has to be a bridge between business and IT, and they have to work extremely closely together. And it has to take up time for senior leadership. If it's not a high priority for senior leadership, then it's not going to really succeed in the organization. So either they have to do it themselves or make sure that they get it done with the right people on the team.
Very interesting. Thank you so much, Pavitra. This is a very, very insightful session. It really goes to the name of the masters that this series is. I hope builders would learn something from this and pick up things that they can implement in their organization, right? Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. I had a great time talking about it, and keep looking forward to doing more on technology with Brigade as well. Thank you.
much.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks.